Port Alios was not a place anyone came to by choice. It was a station built from salvaged ships and desperation, bolted together and left to drift at the edge of civilized space. The corridors were narrow, the lights flickered with dying power, and the air smelled of old fuel and older secrets. It was a place where the laws of the major empires did not reach. A place where criminals gathered to trade, smugglers hid their cargo, and fugitives waited for their names to be forgotten. It was not a place for the weak. It was not a place for the innocent. It was certainly not a place for a lone human. Marcus Kane walked through the corridors with the slow, steady pace of a man who had seen too much to care about where he was. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked with old scars that told stories he never spoke about. His eyes were tired, carrying a weight that seemed to press down on him with every step. He wore a plain jacket, worn at the elbows, and boots that had walked through too many places like this one. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that the best way to avoid trouble was to look like you were not worth the effort. He was looking for a drink. The bar was tucked into a side corridor, its sign flickering between letters, the name barely readable. The Rust Bucket. The door was heavy, reinforced with metal plates welded on by someone who expected trouble. Marcus pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke and the low murmur of voices. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the room. Tables were scattered across the floor, most of them occupied. The patrons looked up as he entered, their conversations pausing for a moment, their eyes tracking him as he walked toward the bar. They were not the kind of people you would invite home. In the corner, a group of Krath mercenaries sat around a table, their bodies large and brutal, their armor scarred from 100 battles. Their tusks were yellowed, their eyes cold. Near the window, Xylo's smugglers watched the room with quick, sharp movements, their hands never far from their blades. In the shadows at the back, Vorkath slavers sat in silence, their faces hidden, their presence a dark weight in the room. The bar was full of the worst kind of people, and they were all looking at the human who had just walked through the door. Marcus ignored them. He walked to the bar, found an empty stool, and sat down. The bartender was a Zentari, a being with 4 arms and a face that had seen everything. He stopped cleaning a glass and looked at Marcus with eyes that held no warmth. "What do you want?" the bartender asked. His voice was flat, unwelcoming. "Whiskey," Marcus said. "Whatever you have." The bartender hesitated. Humans were rare in this part of the station. They were not welcome. The bartender had seen humans before. They came looking for work, looking for passage, looking for something they would not find. Most of them left quickly. Some did not leave at all. Marcus placed a credit chip on the bar. The bartender looked at it, then at Marcus, then reached for a bottle. He poured a glass and slid it across the bar. Marcus took it and drank. The whiskey was cheap, harsh, but it was what he needed. For a moment, the bar returned to its low murmur. The patrons went back to their conversations. The mercenaries laughed at something. The smugglers shifted in their seats. The slavers remained still and silent. Marcus drank his whiskey and wished he was somewhere else. Then a shadow fell over him. A Krath mercenary stood beside him, twice his size, his tusks yellowed, his armor dented and scratched. He had been drinking, his eyes unfocused, his movements slow but heavy. He slammed a thick hand on the bar next to Marcus, making the bottles rattle. "Human," the Krath growled. His voice was deep, thick with alcohol and contempt. "You are in the wrong place." Marcus did not look up. He took another sip of his whiskey. "I just want a drink." The Krath laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound. Others in the bar laughed with him. They had seen humans before. Soft, weak, easy prey. They had seen them come to places like this and leave with nothing, or not leave at all. They did not know that this one was different. They did not see the scars on his hands. They did not see the stillness in his eyes. They did not know that Marcus Kane had been in places far worse than this, with people far worse than them, and he was still standing. The Krath leaned closer, his breath sour, his voice a low growl. "You want a drink, human? You can have a drink. Then you turn around and leave. This is our place, not yours." Marcus finished his whiskey. He set the glass down carefully, took out another credit chip, and placed it on the bar. He stood slowly, his movements unhurried. The Krath grinned, thinking the human was leaving. Marcus turned to face the mercenary. His eyes were calm. His voice was quiet. "I got my drink. I am leaving now. You do not need to be part of this." The Krather's grin faded. He did not like being dismissed. He reached out and grabbed Marcus's arm, his thick fingers digging into the human's sleeve. I think you need to learn some respect, the Krath said. The bar went quiet. The other patrons turned to watch. They expected to see the human beaten, thrown out, maybe killed. They had seen it before. Humans were weak. They did not fight. They did not win. They were wrong. The Krath mercenary did not leave. He leaned closer, his breath sour, his voice dropping to a low growl that rumbled in his thick chest. Humans do not come here, he said. This is our place. You want to keep that pretty face of yours, you turn around and leave. Marcus did not move. He sat at the bar, his glass empty, his eyes fixed on the cracked mirror behind the bottles. The Krather's hand was still on his arm, heavy and thick, the fingers pressing into his sleeve. Marcus could feel the strength in them. It did not matter. He had felt stronger. He finished his drink. He set the glass down carefully, the sound of it touching the bar the only noise in the sudden silence. He took out a credit chip and placed it next to the glass. Then he stood. Slowly. Unhurried. The Krath grinned, showing yellowed tusks, thinking the human was leaving. Thinking he had won. Marcus turned to face the mercenary. His eyes were calm. His voice was quiet, the same voice he had used to order his drink. I said I just wanted a drink, he said. I got it. Now I am leaving. You do not need to be part of this. The Krather's grin faded. He did not like being dismissed. He was used to fear, to respect, to smaller beings stepping out of his way. This human was not stepping. He was standing. The Krather's grip tightened on Marcus's arm, his fingers digging into the sleeve, pressing against the muscle beneath. I think you need to learn some respect, the Krath said. The bar went quiet. The other patrons turned to watch, their conversations dying, their drinks forgotten. They had seen this before. A stranger walks in. A Krath picks a fight. The stranger gets broken and thrown out. It was entertainment. It was a reminder of who ran this place. They expected to see the human beaten, maybe killed. Humans were weak. They did not fight. They did not win. They were wrong. Marcus moved. It was not fast. It was not flashy. It was the movement of someone who had done this 1,000 times. His arm twisted, slipping free of the Krather's grip. His body stepped forward, inside the mercenary's reach, where the big arms could not strike. His hand came up, palm flat, fingers together. He delivered a single blow to the Krather's throat. It was not hard. It did not need to be. It was placed exactly where it needed to be, with exactly the force it needed. The Krather's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He made a choking noise, a wet, desperate sound, and his hands flew to his throat. His knees buckled. He fell to the floor, gasping for air that would not come. The bar was silent. The only sound was the Krather's wheezing, his boots scraping against the floor as he tried to breathe. Marcus looked around at the other patrons. His face was calm. His voice was still quiet. I am leaving now, he said. Do not follow me. He turned toward the door. But the Krath was not alone. 3 more mercenaries rose from their seats, their faces hard, their hands moving toward weapons. One of them shouted something in his own language, a curse or a command. The others in the bar began to stir. The Xylo smugglers set down their drinks and reached for blades. The Vorkath slavers in the shadows shifted, their energy weapons humming to life. They did not like seeing one of their own put down by a human. It was bad for business. Bad for reputation. If word got out that a lone human had walked into the rust bucket and walked out without paying a price, the whole station would think they had gone soft. Marcus stopped. He looked back at the mercenaries, at the smugglers drawing blades, at the slavers with their weapons. He sighed. It was a long, tired sound, the sound of a man who had hoped for a quiet night and was not going to get one. I really just wanted a drink, he said. The first mercenary charged. He was big, fast for his size, his fists raised. Marcus moved. He did not have a weapon. He did not need one. His hands and feet were weapons. He had been fighting since he was a child, on the streets of a human city that no longer existed. He had fought in wars that the galaxy had forgotten, against enemies that would make these criminals run. He had survived things that would break most beings. This was nothing. The first mercenary fell. His arm was broken, his shoulder dislocated, his body hitting the floor before he knew what had happened. The second came at Marcus with a blade. Marcus stepped inside the swing, caught the wrist, twisted. Bone cracked. The blade fell. The mercenary screamed. The third swung a metal pipe. Marcus ducked, came up inside the swing, and drove his elbow into the mercenary's face. Blood sprayed. The mercenary dropped. Marcus moved through them like a storm. His movements were precise, efficient, devastating. He did not kill. He did not need to. He broke arms and dislocated shoulders and shattered knees. He left them on the ground, screaming, clutching their broken bodies, unable to fight. The bar was chaos now. Other patrons rose, reaching for weapons. The Xylos smugglers drew their blades, their faces sharp and hungry. The Vorkath slavers raised their energy weapons, the barrels glowing. They all saw the humans standing in the center of the destruction, and they all made the same decision. He could not be allowed to leave. If one human could do this, could walk into their bar and walk out, then they were not safe. They were not powerful. They were not the predators they thought they were. Marcus looked at the crowd of armed criminals. He did not feel fear. He did not feel anger. He felt a cold, familiar calm. The calm of a man who had been here before, who had faced worse, who had survived. He rolled his shoulders. He cracked his neck. He breathed in, slow and deep. "All right," he said. "Let us get this over with." What happened next was not a fight. It was a lesson. The first Xylos rushed at Marcus, a blade in each hand, his movements fast and sharp. He was quick, the quickest in the bar, his blades cutting lines of silver through the smoke-filled air. Marcus did not block. He did not retreat. He sidestepped, caught the Xylos' arm, and used the creature's own momentum to throw him into a table. The table shattered. Bottles exploded. The Xylos crashed to the floor and did not move again. A Vorkath raised an energy weapon from the shadows, its barrel glowing with charged light. Marcus was already moving. His hand closed around a bottle on the bar. He threw it without looking. The bottle spun through the air and shattered against the Vorkath's face. The creature screamed, dropping the weapon. The shot went wild, burning a hole through the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. Marcus closed the distance, grabbed the weapon, and twisted. Bone cracked. The Vorkath screamed again, his wrist broken, his fingers useless. Marcus dropped the weapon and moved to the next. They kept coming. Krath, Xylos, Vorkath, and others whose names Marcus did not know. They came with blades and clubs and energy weapons and fists. They came with the arrogance of those who had never faced a human who knew how to fight. They thought numbers would win. They thought weapons would win. They thought the human would fall. Marcus met them all. He did not use their weapons. He did not need them. He had his hands, his feet, his elbows, his knees. He had the weight of a lifetime of violence, honed and controlled, shaped by battles they could not imagine. He moved through the bar like a blade through water, cutting down everyone who stood in his way. A Krath swung a chair at his head. Marcus ducked, came up inside the swing, and drove his fist into the Krather's ribs. The armor cracked. The Krath folded. A Xylos lunged with a blade. Marcus caught the wrist, twisted, and used the Xylos' own blade to cut the strap of another Xylos' weapon. The blade fell. Marcus kicked it away. A Vorkath tried to grab him from behind. Marcus dropped his weight, shrugged off the grip, and drove his elbow back into the Vorkath's face. The creature let go, blood streaming from its nose. Marcus turned and put it down with a knee to the chest. The bar was destruction. Tables were overturned. Bottles were shattered, their contents mixing with blood on the floor. The air was thick with smoke and dust and the sounds of breaking bones and desperate screams. Lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the chaos. Marcus did not stop. He could not stop. Stopping was death. He had learned that a long time ago, in places far worse than this. A Krath charged him from behind, a metal pipe in his hands. Marcus heard him coming. He did not turn. He dropped to one knee, spun on his heel, and swept the Krather's legs out from under him. The mercenary crashed down hard, the pipe clattering away. Marcus rose, planted a foot on the Krather's chest, and drove his heel down. The armor cracked. The Krather's eyes rolled back. He did not move. Marcus straightened. He stood in the center of the bar, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. His jacket was torn, hanging off one shoulder. His knuckles were bleeding, the skin split across the bones. There was a cut on his forehead, blood running down into his eye. A bruise was forming on his ribs, dark and deep. But he was standing, and no one else was. He looked around. The patrons who were still conscious lay on the ground, clutching broken limbs, nursing shattered bones. Their weapons were scattered across the floor. Their pride was gone. Those who could move were crawling toward the door, toward the windows, toward anywhere that was not here. They pulled themselves across the broken glass and spilled liquor, desperate to escape the human who had walked into their bar. The ones who could not move lay still, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their eyes staring at the ceiling. Marcus looked at the bartender. The Zentari had not moved from behind the bar. His 4 arms were raised in surrender, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He had seen many things in his years on Port Helios. He had seen fights, murders, things that should not be spoken of. He had never seen anything like this. "Sorry about the mess," Marcus said. He walked to the bar. The bartender flinched, but Marcus did not look at him. He reached over the bar, picked up a bottle that had not been broken, and poured himself a drink. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. He drank, set the glass down, and walked toward the door. Behind him, the bar was silent. The criminals who thought they were predators lay broken on the floor. The ones who could move were already gone, dragging themselves into the corridor, disappearing into the shadows. The ones who could not stared at the human as he walked away. They watched him push open the heavy door and step out into the corridor. They watched him go. And they wondered, lying there in the wreckage of their own arrogance, what kind of species produced something like him. Marcus stepped out into the corridor. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting their sickly glow on the walls. The shadows shifted. The air was cooler here, the smell of smoke and blood fading behind him. He pulled his torn jacket tight against the cold. He wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand. He looked at his knuckles, split and raw, and flexed his fingers. He had had his drink. Now it was time to leave. He walked toward the docking bay, his footsteps steady, his eyes forward. Behind him, the rust bucket was dark and quiet. The door hung open, smoke drifting out into the corridor. The bar would not open again for a long time. The story would spread. The legend would grow. But Marcus Kane did not care about legends. He wanted a drink. He got one. Now he was leaving. News traveled fast on Port Helios. The station was small, a maze of corridors and docking bays held together by salvage and desperation. Secrets did not last here. Stories spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone knew. A human had walked into the rust bucket, the worst bar on the station, the place where the worst people came to drink and trade and forget their crimes. He had walked out alone. His jacket was torn. His knuckles were bloody. Behind him, the bar was empty. The bar was closed now. Its door was locked. Its lights were dark. The patrons who had been inside were scattered. Some were in the medical bay, their arms in splints, their ribs wrapped, their faces marked with the kind of bruises that took weeks to fade. Others had taken the first ships out of the system, not wanting to be on the same station as the human who had walked into their bar and walked out without a scratch. The ones who stayed kept their heads down. They did not talk about what happened. They did not want to be reminded. Marcus Kane did not know that a legend was being born. He did not care. He walked through the corridors of Port Helios with the same slow, steady pace he had used when he arrived. His jacket was torn, hanging off one shoulder. His knuckles were raw, the skin split across the bones. There was a cut on his forehead, a bruise on his ribs. But he walked like a man who had nowhere to be and nothing to prove. He ignored the stares. He ignored the whispers. He ignored the beings who stepped out of his way, pressing themselves against the walls to let him pass. He had seen stares before. He had heard whispers before. They did not matter. He reached the docking bay. His ship was there, a small freighter called the * Last Call Star. It was old, its hull patched in a dozen places, its engines loud and rough. But it was his. It was home. He walked toward the ramp, ready to leave this place behind, ready to find somewhere quiet where he could sit and not be bothered. Human. He stopped. He turned. A Zentari woman stood a few meters away, her 4 arms folded across her chest. She was tall, her skin the pale blue of her people, her face unreadable. She was not armed. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who was used to being in charge. "I am Tessa," she said. "I run operations on this station. I heard what you did in there." Marcus said nothing. He waited. "Those were not good people in that bar," Tessa continued. "But they were my people. They paid me for protection. And you just destroyed them." Marcus shrugged. "They started it." Tessa stared at him for a long moment. Her face did not change. Then she laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, surprised and genuine. It was not the laugh of someone who was mocking him. It was the laugh of someone who had seen something unexpected and was not sure what to make of it. "You are something else, human," she said. "Do you know that?" Marcus did not answer. He had heard that before. From people who wanted something. From people who feared him. From people who thought he was a weapon they could use. He was none of those things. He was just a man who wanted a drink. "I am not looking for trouble," he said. "I came for a drink. I got one. Now I am leaving." Tessa nodded slowly. Her arms were still folded. Her face was still unreadable. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "Maybe. There are people on this station who will not forget what you did. Some of them will want to thank you. Some of them will want to kill you. You should know that." Marcus looked at her. His eyes were calm. Old. They had seen things that Tessa could not imagine. They had seen war and loss and the kind of violence that left marks deeper than skin. He was tired. He was so tired. "I have been running from people who want to kill me for a long time," he said. "I am tired of running. If they want to find me, they know where to look." He turned and walked up the ramp into his ship. He did not look back. Behind him, Tessa stood in the docking bay, her arms still folded, her face thoughtful. She watched the human disappear into the old freighter. She watched the ramp close. She listened to the engines hum to life, loud and rough, the sound of something that had been patched together and kept flying long after it should have fallen apart. "You are a strange one, Marcus Kane," she said to herself. The last call lifted off. It rose through the docking bay, through the station's outer doors, out into the black. Port Helios grew small behind it, a cluster of lights in the darkness, a place where stories spread fast and legends were born. In the days that followed, the story spread. From Port Helios to the trade routes. From the trade routes to the major worlds. From the major worlds to the edges of known space. A human had walked into a bar full of the worst criminals in the sector. He had walked out alone. The bar was empty behind him. The story grew. It was embellished. Added to. Some said he fought 100 men. Some said he did not even break a sweat. Some said he was a ghost, a legend, a myth that had been wandering the galaxy for centuries, looking for a quiet place to rest. But those who were there knew the truth. He was just a man who wanted a drink. And in less than a minute, he had reminded them why humans were not to be underestimated. The galaxy would not forget. The last call drifted through the void between stars. There was no hurry. There was never any hurry. The ship moved at its own pace, its engines humming a low, steady rhythm that Marcus had come to know as well as his own heartbeat. He sat in the cockpit, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the streaks of light slide past the viewport. The ship was on autopilot, taking him nowhere in particular. He had no destination. He never did. He thought about the bar, about the Krath who had grabbed his arm, about the fight that followed. He had not wanted it. He never wanted it. But it always found him. He was the kind of man that trouble found. He had been since he was young, since the streets of a city that no longer existed, since the wars that the galaxy had forgotten. Trouble was like a shadow. It followed him. He had stopped running from it a long time ago. His comm unit beeped. He ignored it. It beeped again. He sighed, reached over, and opened the channel. A face appeared on the screen. It was Tessa, the Zentari woman from the station. Her forearms were folded, her face was calm, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something like warmth. "You left before I could thank you," she said. Marcus frowned. "Thank me?" Those people in the bar. They were not just criminals. They were the ones who ran the black market on this station. They sold weapons to slavers. They sold information to pirates. They made this station a place where innocent people could not live. And you broke them. Marcus said nothing. He had not known that. He had not cared. He had just wanted a drink. "You did not know that," Tessa said, as if reading his thoughts. "You just wanted a drink. But you did something good, Marcus Kane. You should know that." He looked at her face on the screen. She was not lying. He could tell. He had learned to tell, after years of being lied to, after years of learning that the truth was the only thing that mattered. She believed what she was saying. He was not sure he believed it himself. "I am not a hero," he said. "No," Tessa agreed. Her voice was soft, but it was firm. "You are not. You are a man who walked into a bar and cleared it in under a minute. That is not a hero. That is a force of nature. And there are people out there who need forces of nature." She paused. Her eyes held his. "I have a job for you. Not fighting. Not killing. Just watching. A transport of refugees. They are coming through this sector next week. They have been running from a war, from people who want to hurt them. They need someone to make sure they get where they are going. Someone who can handle trouble if it comes. Are you interested?" Marcus looked out the viewport at the endless stars. He thought about the bar, about the fight, about the way the criminals had looked at him when he walked out, broken and afraid. He thought about the way Tessa looked at him now. Not with fear, not with anger, with something like respect. He was not used to that. He thought about the refugees. People who were running from something, just like he had been running for so long. People who needed someone to stand between them and the trouble that was coming. He had been standing between trouble and people his whole life. It was the only thing he knew how to do. He looked back at the screen. When do we leave? Tessa smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it was real. Tomorrow. I will send the coordinates. The screen went dark. Marcus sat in the cockpit, his coffee cold in his hands, the streaks of light still sliding past the viewport. He was not a hero. He had never wanted to be. Heroes were the ones who died young, who left behind stories and nothing else. He had survived. That was what he did. He survived. But maybe, he thought, there was more to life than running from the next fight. Maybe there was something worth fighting for. Not for survival. Not because trouble found him, but because there were people who needed someone to stand in the way. And he was good at standing in the way. He set the coffee down. He reached for the controls and adjusted the ship's course. The last call turned, slowly, its engines humming a new rhythm. It headed toward a new destination. Toward refugees who needed protection. Toward a future he had not expected. Toward something that might look like peace. In the bar on Port Helios, the lights were off, the doors were locked. The patrons were gone, scattered to the corners of the station, to the medical bays, to the ships that had carried them away. They told stories about the human who had walked in and walked out. About the minute that had changed everything. They told each other to stay away from humans. They told each other that some things were not worth the fight. But somewhere in the void, a small freighter carried a scarred man toward a new purpose. He did not know what he would find. He did not know if he would ever find peace. But he knew one thing. When trouble found him, he would be ready. He had always been ready. And somewhere in the galaxy, the story spread. The legend grew. A human who cleared a bar in under a minute. A human who did not want to fight but never lost. A human who reminded them, every time, why you do not start a fight with a species that had been fighting since before it learned to walk. The last call moved through the dark. Marcus Kane watched the stars and waited. He was not looking for trouble. But if it found him, he would be ready. He always was.